"Oh my God, fire!" The cry rang out like a gunshot. In a breath, the grand Coleman ballroom turned from laughter to chaos. Guests screamed, gowns tangled, heels snapped against marble, and champagne glasses shattered underfoot. Smoke rolled down the staircase, orange flames crackling behind it, devouring curtains as if the house itself were being swallowed alive. Richard Coleman's chest seized. His daughter Sophie, barely 1-year-old, was asleep upstairs in the nursery. He bolted toward the staircase. But before he could reach the first step, Clara, his new wife in her crimson gown, caught his arm with shocking strength. "No, Richard," she screamed, her voice cutting through the panic. "You'll be burned alive. Let the firemen do their job. I have to get my baby." Richard roared, his face white, veins standing out on his neck as he tried to tear himself free. Another explosion shook the mansion, rattling the chandeliers. Flames leapt higher, the smoke thickening until the air was hard to breathe. Guests scrambled like a herd, some falling to the floor, others clawing for the doors. Shouts mixed with hacking coughs, the party unraveling in a blur of hysteria. Above the roar, faint but piercing, came Sophie's cry. A desperate, high-pitched wail that sliced Richard's heart in two. "She's still alive," he gasped. "I'm going to her." But Clara's grip only tightened, her nails biting into his arm. Her face was streaked with ash, but her eyes were strangely cold, almost unflinching. "If you go up there, you'll die too. Don't be a fool." From the corner of the hall, a small figure suddenly darted forward. Anna. She was just 7. Her braids flying as she dropped the tray she had been carrying. Her wide dark eyes locked onto the staircase, onto the smoke curling from above. And without hesitation she ran. "Anna!" A woman's cry tore out, sharper even than the chaos. Her mother, barely 35, still young, her apron stained from the night's work, rushed after her. "No, baby, no, you can't." She caught at her daughter's sleeve, but Anna twisted free, determination burning hotter than the fire itself. The mother stumbled, collapsing to her knees as she realized she couldn't stop her child. Tears streamed down her face, and with a choking sob she cried out, "God, no, please, not my little girl." Her body shook violently before she fainted against the polished floor, overcome by grief and terror. Servants rushed to lift her, but her arms hung limp as she moaned her daughter's name. The crowd gasped as Anna vanished into the smoke. Some guests covered their mouths in horror. Others muttered prayers, but none moved to follow. Richard's chest pounded as though it would tear open. His baby was upstairs. His daughter's cries echoed faintly, and now a child not his own had run where no one else dared. Clara's grip dug into him again, her voice sharp with command. "Don't you see? It's too late. If you go in, you'll lose everything: your life, your future, everything we've built." But Richard's gaze stayed fixed on the fire where Anna had disappeared. His breath ragged, his body trembling. His daughter was still up there, and it was not him who had answered her cries. It was Anna. The heat hit Anna the moment she crossed the threshold of the stairwell. It felt like stepping into the mouth of a furnace, the air so thick with smoke that each breath clawed down her throat like fire. The grand staircase, polished wood only minutes before, was now alive with flames licking up its sides. The once bright carpet had begun to curl and blacken. She pulled the hem of her faded dress over her nose and mouth, coughing as the acrid stench of burning paint and wood filled her lungs. Above, faint but steady, came the sound she had fixed in her mind. Sophie's cries. She forced herself up the first step, the wood hot against her small shoes. The smoke pressed around her, blinding, and she dropped to her knees, remembering what her grandmother once told her. "Keep low, Anna. The air's clearer near the floor." Crawling, one hand pressed to the step ahead, she inched her way up. A beam cracked somewhere overhead, sparks raining down dangerously close. Back in the hall, muffled by the roar of the flames, Anna thought she heard her mother's voice calling her name, breaking with terror. But she couldn't stop, not now. Each cry from Sophie pulled her forward like an invisible rope. At the landing, the smoke was thicker, swirling black clouds choking every breath. Anna's eyes stung with tears, but she knew the way. She had been in the nursery before, had sat on the rug beside Sophie's crib and made the baby laugh with silly faces. Left turn, then straight past the window, then the pale door with the little painted lamb on it. Her small hand touched the nursery doorknob, and she hissed as it scorched her skin. She yanked her dress over her palm, turned it, and shoved the door open. A rush of smoke poured inside, and Sophie's cries grew louder, sharp and frightened. Inside, the nursery was a world of shadows and red light. Flames licked at the curtains, creeping toward the crib. Sophie lay there, cheeks wet, tiny fists waving helplessly, her stuffed lamb falling to the floor. Anna stumbled forward, scooping the baby into her arms. Sophie was warm and trembling, her cries muffled as she buried her face against Anna's neck. "It's okay, Sophie," Anna whispered hoarsely, though her voice shook. "I've got you. I'll get you out." She grabbed the blanket from the crib, dipped it quickly into the spilled water from Sophie's tipped cup, and wrapped it around the baby. Clutching her tightly, Anna turned back toward the hall. The way she had come was already closing. Flames surged across the ceiling, beams groaning as if the house itself was screaming. The staircase she had crawled up only minutes ago was now a river of fire. Heat pressed against her face, threatening to steal her breath. She coughed violently, almost dropping to her knees. "No," she told herself fiercely, hugging Sophie tighter. "We can't stop." Her eyes darted around desperately. Then she saw at a small side window near the nursery. She stumbled toward it, pushing it open. Cool air rushed in, sharp and sweet compared to the choking smoke. But the window was too narrow for both her and Sophie to fit through at once. Anna thought fast. She pulled the blanket tighter around Sophie, then leaned out, shouting toward the lawn below. "Help! She's here!" Her voice was raw, nearly drowned by the roar of the fire, but she screamed again. "Catch her!" Below, through the smoke, she glimpsed shapes the guests gathered on the lawn, some pointing up at her, others shouting. Richard's voice bellowed, hoarse and desperate. "Sophie!" Clara's hand clamped onto his arm again, even there, her shrill voice ringing. "Don't you dare, Richard. She'll kill them both." But he shoved her away, his face stricken with terror, eyes fixed on the window where Anna clung. Anna held Sophie to her chest for one last moment, whispering, "It's okay, little one. They'll take you now." Then she extended the baby out through the window. Strong hands reached up Richard's hands, and the baby was lifted safely from her arms. Sophie's cries filled the air, but she was alive, safe in her father's grasp. Sometimes it takes the smallest among us to remind the world what real courage looks like. Anna's choice in that burning mansion was more than bravery. It was love, pure and selfless. If this moment touched your heart, share your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear what it meant to you, and if you believe stories like this deserve to be told, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel so you never miss the next one. Relief flooded Anna, but only for a second. The fire behind her roared, a wall of heat pressing against her back. She turned, trying to climb out herself, but her foot caught on the broken frame, her dress snagging. She tugged hard, panic rising. Flames swept into the nursery, consuming the curtains in a single violent rush. Below, Richard was shouting, "Anna, jump, you can do it." His voice was ragged, torn by smoke and fear. Around him, the guests stood frozen, horrified. Clara's face was pale. Her lips pressed tight, but her eyes glinted with something dark. Anna yanked her dress free, coughing so hard she could barely see. Her lungs burned. Her arms trembled. Her vision blurred. She tried to climb through, but a beam above groaned and snapped, crashing down near her feet. Sparks erupted, showering her hair and shoulders. Her mother's voice pierced through the night from the lawn, broken and pleading. "Anna, my baby girl, please God, bring her out." The 35-year-old woman collapsed again, clutching at the grass, sobbing so violently the servants could barely hold her upright. Anna's small hands gripped the window frame, her skin blistered from heat. She coughed once more, then locked eyes with Richard below. For a moment, the chaos stilled. A grown man, a billionaire who had everything, and a 7-year-old girl with nothing but courage connected by the life of the baby between them. With the last of her strength, Anna pushed herself through the window. The flames snapped at her heels as she fell forward, and strong arms caught her before she hit the ground. Richard held her close, coughing, his eyes wide with disbelief. Sophie wailed in one arm, Anna gasped for air in the other. Guests erupted with cries of relief. Clara stood stiffly, her face composed but her hands trembling as though holding back fury. Anna's mother stumbled forward, shrieking her child's name, and fell to her knees beside them. She clutched Anna's burned hand, sobbing. Richard lowered Anna gently into her mother's embrace, but his gaze lingered on the girl's smoke-streaked face. Something stirred deep in him, something that made his heart seize with a strange recognition. He didn't yet understand what it was, but in that moment, one truth blazed brighter than the fire consuming his mansion. This little girl had done what no one else dared. She had saved his child. The Coleman estate, once the picture of pride and elegance, was now collapsing into chaos. Sirens wailed in the distance, still too far away, while the mansion burned like a wounded beast. Smoke curled into the night sky, red sparks rising with the wind. The grand ballroom where moments ago guests had laughed over champagne was a stampede of fear heels snapping, tuxedos smudged with ash, shrieks echoing as people shoved through the doors. Richard held Sophie tight in one arm, her tiny face pressed against his chest, her sobs muffled by his jacket. In his other arm he steadied Anna, the little girl coughing, her skin blistered, her braids streaked with ash. Her mother knelt on the grass beside him, cradling Anna's hand, weeping openly with relief. But Clara's voice cut through the night like glass. "Richard, you're insane." She pulled at his sleeve, eyes flashing in the firelight. "That child could have killed Sophie, dragging her through smoke like that. You should have stopped her." Richard turned on her, his face dark with fury. "She saved Sophie's life. You stood there and tried to hold me back." His voice cracked with rage, his eyes still wet from terror. Clara recoiled, lips pressed tight, then quickly smoothed her expression back into the mask of a grieving wife. The fire roared louder, beams snapping like gunshots as the west wing caved in. Flames lit up the sky, casting long shadows across the lawn. Guests huddled together, coughing, murmuring prayers, while others whispered nervously, their eyes flicking toward Clara. A fire engine finally pulled into the drive, its red light spinning. Firemen leapt down, hoses uncoiling. But even they hesitated at the inferno before them. The blaze had spread too quickly, unnaturally so. One of them muttered, "It's like it was fed gasoline." Richard's eyes narrowed, his mind whirling. He looked back at Clara, who stood rigid at his side. Her gown was immaculate, untouched by the smoke, her eyes cold as she stared at the burning house. A chill crept through him despite the heat around them. Meanwhile, Anna coughed violently in her mother's arms. Her small body trembled from the smoke she had inhaled. Richard crouched down beside her, his expression softening. "Anna," he said hoarsely, "you were brave. You saved my little girl." Her wide eyes lifted to him, rimmed with red, but she didn't speak. Instead, she clutched tighter to her mother's sleeve, as though afraid he might take her away. Her mother, tears streaking her soot-stained face, looked up at Richard. "She's just a child, sir," she whispered brokenly. "She's my only one. I thought I'd lost her in there." Richard swallowed hard, feeling the weight of her words. He looked from the exhausted girl to his sobbing baby, and then back to the house collapsing behind them. The truth pressed in on him. He owed his daughter's life to this little girl no one had noticed before tonight. Clara interrupted, her voice sharp. "Richard, we need to leave. The firemen will handle it. Staying here is dangerous." She reached for him again, but this time he stepped away, his jaw set. "No," he said firmly, "I'm not leaving. Not until I know this fire is under control, and not until Sophie and Anna are safe." Clara's eyes flickered with something unreadable, but she said nothing more. The firemen shouted orders, their hoses spraying arcs of water onto the flames. Steam hissed, but the fire raged on, swallowing wall after wall. Richard stood unmoving, Sophie cradled close, watching as his mansion, the place he had built with pride, was consumed. Guests slipped quietly away, their fine cars crunching over gravel as they left behind the spectacle. On the grass, Anna's mother rocked her gently, murmuring prayers. Richard's eyes lingered on the child once more. Something inside him twisted at the sight, the courage in her small frame, the stubborn strength in her eyes. It was a feeling he could not yet name, but it bound him to her. Above them, the roof of the mansion groaned, then collapsed in a storm of sparks. The firemen shouted, dragging hoses back. Richard held Sophie tighter, shielding her from the blast of heat. And in the roaring glow of his burning house, Richard Coleman knew two things with painful clarity. He had nearly lost everything tonight. And the truth of this fire was far darker than it appeared. The fire devoured the Coleman mansion with a ferocity that shook everyone on the lawn. Walls groaned, windows burst with sharp cracks, and the once proud estate seemed to scream as its beams collapsed. Sirens wailed closer now, more fire engines, ambulances pulling up in a rush. Paramedics hurried across the grass with stretchers, flashlights cutting through the thick haze. Richard stood rooted, clutching Sophie against his chest. The baby whimpered softly, her cries weaker now, her little lungs rattling from the smoke she had breathed. Every sound from her lips tore at him. He rocked her gently, whispering, "Daddy's here. You're safe now, my girl." His eyes burned, not from the smoke but from the sheer terror of almost losing her. Beside him, Anna sat wrapped in her mother's trembling arms. The woman, only 35 yet aged by grief, kissed her daughter's soot-streaked forehead again and again, sobbing prayers of thanks. Anna coughed, her small shoulders shaking, but she did not cry. Her wide eyes stayed fixed on the flames, as though the fire had carved something permanent into her memory. Clara, standing nearby, crossed her arms tightly, her satin gown immaculate despite the chaos. Her face was pale but composed, her gaze sharp as she looked at the girl who had saved Sophie. Richard turned toward her, his jaw hard. If it weren't for Anna, Sophie would be gone. Clara's lips tightened. "Richard, don't you see? That child ran in recklessly. She could have killed Sophie, dragging her through smoke like that. What if she had dropped her?" Richard's voice was low but edged with steel. "She didn't drop her. She did what none of us could. She saved her." The paramedic stepped forward, gently taking Sophie from Richard's arms to place her on a stretcher. Another knelt by Anna, checking her breathing. "She's inhaled a lot of smoke," the medic said gravely. "We need to get her to the hospital now." Anna's mother clutched her hand tighter. "I'll go with her," she said quickly, her voice still trembling. Richard nodded. "I'll follow with Sophie." His gaze lingered on Anna, a strange heaviness pressing his chest. She looked so small on the grass, her lashes clumped with tears and soot. Yet she had faced what even grown men had feared. A firefighter approached, removing his helmet, his face streaked with ash. "Mr. Coleman," he said, "this fire didn't spread naturally. It's too fast, too precise. Almost like it was fed to burn the house down from the inside." Richard stiffened. His eyes flicked to Clara, who was watching the exchange carefully. She shifted, adjusting her gown as though the heat had only now reached her, but her eyes flashed with something cold before she turned away. "Handle it," Richard said tightly to the firefighter, though his mind was already racing. He could still feel Clara's hands holding him back at the foot of the stairs. She hadn't shouted for Sophie. She hadn't even tried. The paramedics loaded Sophie into the ambulance, strapping a small oxygen mask over her tiny face. Anna, pale and wheezing, was carried onto another stretcher. Her mother walked beside her, holding her hand, whispering, "You're brave, my baby, so brave." As the ambulance's doors shut, Richard turned to Clara. "You can ride back with the guests. I'm going with my daughter." His voice left no room for argument. Clara's smile was thin, brittle. "Of course, Richard. Do what you must." The ambulance engines roared, their sirens slicing into the night as they sped away toward Houston. Richard sat inside with Sophie, his hands gripping hers tightly as though sheer will alone could keep her tethered to life. Across from him, another paramedic worked over Anna, her small frame trembling beneath the oxygen mask, her eyes fluttering between consciousness and sleep. Richard watched her, his throat tight. This child had carried his daughter through fire. She had risked everything without hesitation, and deep in his chest, A question burned hotter than the flames they had just escaped. Why did he feel as though he had seen those eyes before, long ago? The ambulance sped through the Texas night, its siren wailing, red lights flashing across the empty highway. Inside, the air smelled of antiseptic and smoke. Richard sat stiffly, Sophie cradled on the stretcher beside him, a tiny oxygen mask covering her flushed face. Each weak rise and fall of her chest twisted his heart tighter, until it felt like a vice pressing down. He brushed her small hand with his thumb, whispering over and over, "Hold on, baby girl. Daddy's here. Don't let go." Across from him, Anna lay propped on another stretcher, her mother gripping her hand with desperate strength. The girl's braids were singed at the ends, her dress scorched in patches. Her lips were chapped and blackened from the smoke, her breath shallow under the hiss of oxygen. Yet her dark eyes flickered open now and then. And each time they found Sophie, as if to make sure the baby was still alive. "She's just a child," Anna's mother murmured, her voice raw from crying. 7 years old, and she ran into that fire like... She broke off, clutching her daughter's hand tighter. Tears slid down her cheeks, streaking the soot across her skin. She nearly died in there. "Dozo." Richard's throat tightened. He wanted to speak, to comfort, but no words seemed enough. His eyes remained fixed on Anna, the little girl who had risked everything for his daughter. Courage like that, he had seen it in soldiers, in men hardened by war and work, never in someone so small. The paramedic shifted beside them, checking vitals, adjusting masks. "They'll both need close monitoring," he said, voice brisk but steady. "The baby's lungs are delicate smoke, like this can scar them, and the girl inhaled more than she should have survived. But they're fighters. Both of them." The words settled heavy in the ambulance. Richard exhaled, a sound that was half relief, half prayer. He looked at Anna again, and something stirred inside him. There was something about her face, the sharp line of her cheekbones, the stubborn set of her mouth. Something that pulled at memory, though he couldn't place it yet. The ambulance rattled over a bump, and Sophie stirred, whimpering weakly. Richard leaned closer, smoothing her damp hair back. "Shh, my little one," he whispered. "Daddy's here." He kissed her forehead, his lips trembling. Beside him, Anna's mother whispered a prayer under her breath, words trembling in Spanish and English alike. "Lord, thank you for sparing her. Thank you for sparing them both." Then, looking at Richard, her eyes red and swollen, she added, "Mr. Coleman, you'll never know what it cost her to do what she did. She saw her own mama die in a fire when she was smaller than this. I thought she'd never be able to face flames again. But tonight," her voice cracked, "she couldn't let your baby burn. She just couldn't." The revelation struck Richard like a hammer. He turned his gaze back to Anna. The child's chest rose and fell unevenly, but she still held tight to her mother's hand. Through her half-closed eyes, he saw not fear but a quiet certainty, a child who had stared into her greatest terror and chosen to act. He pressed a hand to his forehead, overwhelmed. In the silence between sirens, the truth settled deep. He owed both of his daughters' lives, Sophie's by birth, Anna's by her sacrifice, to this little girl's courage. When the ambulance doors swung open at the hospital, a rush of fluorescent light and fresh night air hit them. Nurses hurried forward, rolling Sophie and Anna on their stretchers into the emergency ward. Richard followed close, his chest pounding, refusing to let Sophie's hand slip from his. Anna's mother walked beside her daughter, whispering promises, her voice breaking on every word. As the hospital doors closed behind them, Richard cast one last glance toward Clara's approaching figure outside. Her gown was immaculate, her face carefully composed as she stepped from the sleek car that had followed the ambulance. But her eyes were cold, and in them Richard thought he saw something darker than grief, something like resentment. He turned away quickly, following his daughter and the little girl who had saved her into the sterile brightness of the ward. And though the fire behind them still raged in the night, Richard felt that the true inferno was only beginning. The emergency ward was a blur of white coats, rushing footsteps, and the sharp scent of antiseptic. Nurses wheeled Sophie down one corridor, Anna down another, and Richard found himself torn between the two stretchers moving swiftly away from him. His chest tightened until he could hardly breathe. "Mr. Coleman," a nurse said firmly, guiding him by the arm, "your baby will be stabilized in the pediatric unit. She inhaled smoke, but she's breathing. Let us work." Richard nodded numbly, his throat too tight for words. His hand slipped from Sophie's tiny one as the stretcher turned the corner, leaving him standing in the harsh fluorescent light, fists clenched at his sides. Behind him, Anna's mother clung to her daughter's stretcher as it was wheeled into an adjoining room. Her cries echoed down the hall, raw and shaking. "Stay with me, Anna. Don't let go, my brave girl." Richard turned, watching them vanish. The image seared itself into his mind, the soot-streaked child who had carried his daughter through fire, and the 35-year-old mother collapsing under the weight of terror. His gut twisted. Something about the girl's face lingered with him, pulling at a memory he couldn't yet place. Doctors moved quickly around him, papers shuffling, monitors beeping. Clara entered at last, sweeping into the hall in her crimson gown, perfectly untouched by ash or smoke. Her perfume reached him before her voice did, honeyed but sharp. "Richard," she said, placing a manicured hand on his arm. "You look pale. You need to sit down." "I don't need to sit," he snapped, shaking her hand off. "My baby is in there. That little girl is fighting for her life. And you," his voice cracked with restrained rage, "you tried to stop me." Clara's eyes widened in mock offense. "I was saving you. If you had gone in, you'd be dead right now. Is that what you wanted? To leave Sophie an orphan?" The words sliced at him, but the fury in his chest did not cool. "It was Anna who saved her," he said bitterly. "Not you. Not me. A child." Clara's lips pressed thin, her eyes flicking briefly toward the closed door where Anna's stretcher had gone. Something unreadable passed over her face, disdain, perhaps even anger, but then it was gone, smoothed away under her practiced mask of concern. The hospital corridor quieted for a moment. Richard sat heavily on a bench outside the pediatric unit, elbows on his knees, his head in his hands. His mind replayed the moment Anna appeared at the window. Sophie in her arms, her tiny frame silhouetted against the blaze. The memory burned hotter than the fire itself. Minutes stretched into an eternity. At last, a nurse emerged from the pediatric unit. "Mr. Coleman?" Richard was on his feet instantly. "Yes. My daughter Sophie? She's stable for now," the nurse said, offering a tired smile. "Her lungs are irritated, but we have her on oxygen. She'll need monitoring, but she's strong." Relief surged through him so fast his knees nearly buckled. He gripped the nurse's arm. "Thank you. God. Thank you." The nurse nodded and added gently, "The other little girl, Anna, she's in critical observation. She's fighting hard." Richard's gaze shifted toward the other wing, his chest aching. He had no claim to Anna, and yet the thought of her small body struggling for breath tightened something deep inside him. Anna's mother emerged then, her face streaked with tears but her eyes fierce. "She's alive," she whispered, as though testing the words. "They say she has burns, smoke in her lungs, but she's alive." Her voice cracked, and she pressed a trembling hand to her mouth. Richard placed a hand on her shoulder, uncharacteristically gentle. "Your daughter is braver than any soldier I've ever met. She saved my Sophie. I won't forget it." The woman met his eyes, and in hers he saw both gratitude and sorrow, a weight he couldn't name. "She shouldn't have had to be brave," she murmured. "She's only 7. Down the hall, Clara watched from a distance, her expression hidden in shadow. Her hands, folded neatly before her, tightened until her knuckles turned white. Richard turned back toward the doors of the pediatric unit where Sophie lay, and toward the wing where Anna fought for breath. The fire had taken his home, but it had given him something far greater. A truth he could not yet see fully. A bond forged in smoke and flame, and deep in his bones, he felt that this was only the beginning. The hospital quieted as the hours stretched toward midnight. The chaos of the fire had given way to the sterile rhythm of beeping monitors and the soft squeak of nurses' shoes against linoleum floors. Outside the window, Houston's skyline flickered faintly in the distance, but here in the children's wing, Time seemed to stand still. Richard sat by Sophie's bed, his large frame hunched forward, one hand resting gently over his daughter's tiny fingers. She slept under a thin blanket, her chest rising and falling with the aid of the oxygen mask fitted to her face. Her cheeks were pale, her lashes wet with dried tears, but she was alive. Each breath she took was a mercy that left Richard whispering silent prayers. Across the hall, muffled behind another door, lay Anna. Richard hadn't been able to stop thinking of her since the moment she stumbled out of the fire with Sophie in her arms. He had carried his baby to safety. Yes, but it had been Anna who had risked everything. The image of her soot-streaked face, her small arms clutching Sophie against her chest, haunted him. He rose at last, torn by an impulse he could not ignore, and stepped quietly into the hallway. The nurse at the desk looked up, nodded, and pointed him toward a side room. Inside, Anna lay on a hospital bed, her small body dwarfed by the white sheets. A tangle of wires connected her to the monitors beside her, their soft beeping marking the rhythm of her fragile breaths. An oxygen mask covered most of her face, fogging slightly with each exhale. Her mother sat at her side, clutching Anna's hand as though it were the only thing tethering her to life. The woman's face was lined with exhaustion and streaked with tears, her dark hair pulled back in a hurried knot. When she saw Richard in the doorway, she stiffened, her eyes narrowing. "What are you doing here?" she asked quietly, her voice hoarse. Richard hesitated, his hand still gripping the doorframe. "I came to thank her, to thank you both. She saved my little girl." His voice broke on the words. The woman's gaze softened slightly, though suspicion lingered. "She shouldn't have had to," she murmured. She brushed a hand over Anna's forehead, her voice trembling. "She's 7 years old. She's already seen more fire than any child should. I thought it had taken her once. I thought tonight it would take her again." Richard stepped into the room, his throat thick. "She's braver than anyone I know, and I owe her more than I can ever repay." For a moment, silence hung heavy between them, broken only by the beeping of the monitor. Richard's eyes drifted to Anna's face, pale but peaceful, as if the storm of the night had finally released her. He felt something stir deep inside, a strange pull, like a thread connecting him to this girl. Behind them, the door creaked. Clara stepped inside, her heels clicking against the floor. Her crimson gown had been replaced by a sleek black coat, but her presence was no less commanding. "Richard," she said softly, though her eyes were cold as glass. "You need rest. Sophie needs you strong." Her gaze flicked toward Anna with a hint of disdain. "This child is in good hands with her mother. You shouldn't exhaust yourself worrying about someone else's problem." Richard's head snapped toward her, his jaw tightening. "She's not someone else's problem," he said sharply. "She's the reason Sophie is alive." Clara's smile was brittle. "And yet Sophie could have died in her arms." "It was reckless." Anna's mother rose then, her eyes flashing. "Reckless? My child went where no one else dared, not even you, Mrs. Coleman. If she hadn't, your baby would be ashes right now." Her voice shook with fury. "Reckless? No, courageous." Richard felt his chest tighten with pride for the woman's words, and with shame that Clara had to be corrected at all. He turned back to Anna, then to her mother. "If there's anything you need, anything at all, you'll have it. This house, this family, owes her everything." Anna stirred faintly, her small fingers twitching in her mother's grip. Richard leaned closer, his heart thundering. But her eyes did not open. Still, the sight filled him with a fierce protectiveness he hadn't expected. Outside, thunder rolled across the night sky, though no storm had been forecast. Richard shivered, a chill running down his spine. Something about this night felt fated, as though the fire had burned away not just his home, but the veil over truths long hidden. And as he stood watching the fragile rise and fall of Anna's chest, he knew one thing with absolute clarity. This child had entered his life for a reason. And whatever that reason was, it was only beginning to reveal itself. By dawn, the hospital had grown eerily quiet. The night's chaos had faded into the hum of machines, the shuffle of nurses, and the low murmur of tired families waiting for word from doctors. Outside, the first pale light of morning crept across the horizon. But for Richard, there was no sense of peace. He hadn't slept. He couldn't. His baby girl lay in one room, and in another, the little girl who had saved her fought to breathe. Richard stood by the window of the pediatric wing, his shoulders tense, staring out at the city skyline. His suit jacket hung open, his tie loosened, the lines around his eyes deeper than they had been the day before. In the reflection of the glass, he saw Clara's figure moving behind him. "You should try to rest," she said gently, though her tone felt rehearsed. "Staring at the window won't bring Sophie back to health any faster." Richard didn't turn. "She's alive because of Anna." His voice was low, edged with exhaustion. "I can't stop thinking about it. That child ran through fire when everyone else froze, including me." "Oh." Clara's smile tightened, her reflection in the glass catching the faintest twitch at the corner of her mouth. Or perhaps it was foolishness. A child doesn't understand danger. She could have killed Sophie if she stumbled. Richard turned sharply, his eyes narrowing. "Don't ever say that again. She risked everything. You held me back. If it weren't for her, I'd be burying my daughter today." For the first time, Clara faltered under his glare. But only for a second. Then she composed herself, her voice smooth once more. "I was trying to protect you. This family needs you alive." She stepped closer, her perfume lingering in the air. "Don't waste your energy worrying about some servant's child. Focus on Sophie. On us." Richard studied her face, searching for the woman he thought he'd married, but all he saw was control a mask that hid something colder beneath. He said nothing more, turning back toward the window. Later that morning, a man in uniform approached. He was one of the investigators assigned to the fire, his notepad tucked under his arm, his expression grim. "Mr. Coleman," he began, "I need to speak with you about the blaze." Richard led him into a quiet corner of the hallway. Clara followed, her heels clicking softly against the floor, her presence stiff at his side. The investigator cleared his throat. "We've examined the remains of the West Wing. The fire spread faster than normal. Too fast. We found traces of accelerant near the stairwell and the kitchen. This wasn't an accident. Someone wanted that house to burn." Richard felt his stomach drop. His fists clenched at his sides. "Are you telling me it was arson?" "Yes, sir," the investigator said. "And not just that it was carefully planned. Whoever said it knew exactly where to place the accelerant to trap anyone upstairs." Clara let out a sharp gasp, pressing a hand to her chest. "That's horrifying. Who would do such a thing?" Her voice trembled, but her eyes flicked sideways, gauging Richard's reaction. Richard's jaw tightened. His mind replayed the night the explosion, the smoke spreading like it had been fed, Clara's grip on his arm, the strange coldness in her eyes when Sophie's cries filled the hall. A chill slid down his spine. "Do you have any suspects?" Richard asked, his voice steady but heavy. "Not yet," the investigator admitted, "but we'll be questioning staff and guests, someone close enough to the family to know the house." Clara's voice rose quickly. "Richard, surely you don't think anyone we know would—" She cut herself off, biting her lip, then smoothed her tone. "We should let the police do their job." Richard nodded slowly, though suspicion gnawed at his gut. He glanced through the glass door into the recovery room where Anna lay, her chest rising faintly beneath the oxygen mask. His heart clenched. Whoever had done this fire had nearly killed his daughter, and had nearly killed Anna, too. For the first time, Richard felt something more than gratitude for the little girl. He felt responsibility. He turned back to the investigator. "Do whatever it takes. I want to know who did this, and I want them brought to justice." The man nodded, tipping his hat, and walked away. Clara slipped her arm through Richard's, her touch soft but her voice carefully measured. "Richard, don't torture yourself with suspicions. Think of Sophie. Think of our future." But Richard barely heard her. His mind was already racing, circling one thought over and over. The fire wasn't fate. It wasn't an accident. It was a choice, and someone he trusted had chosen to try to burn his daughter alive. Anna stirred in her hospital bed, her breathing shallow beneath the steady hiss of the oxygen mask. The morning light filtered weakly through the blinds, striping her small face with pale gold. Her mother sat at her side, whispering prayers and stroking her hand, eyes red from sleeplessness. Richard lingered in the doorway, his tall frame casting a shadow across the room. He had meant to pass quietly, just to see if the girl was improving. But her faint voice pulled him in. "Mama, the fire." Her mother leaned closer, brushing sweat-soaked braids from her forehead. "Shh, baby, you're safe now." But Anna's eyes fluttered open, distant, as if they were looking at something beyond the room. It was like before. Her words were broken by coughs, but her meaning struck Richard like a blow. Her mother stiffened, her lips pressing tight. She looked at Richard quickly, as if she hadn't wanted him to hear. "Before?" Richard repeated, stepping closer. "Anna, what do you mean?" The child blinked at him, her gaze heavy with memories far too old for such young eyes. "When Mama screamed, when I saw the flames eat the walls, I was smaller then. I couldn't move," she said to run, but I froze. "I saw her. I saw my mama." Her voice cracked, the words crumbling into sobs. Richard's chest clenched. He crouched beside the bed, searching the girl's face. "You've seen a fire like this before?" Anna's mother spoke quickly, her voice sharp with protective edge. "That's enough. She's weak. She shouldn't be talking about this." But Anna shook her head faintly, her small hand tightening around her mother's fingers. "I remember, Mama. I was 5. The fire took her. The woman who held me. She pushed me out. She never came back." Tears leaked from the corners of her eyes, carving streaks down her soot-smudged cheeks. Richard froze, something deep in him twisted. A buried memory stirred smoke, screaming, a woman with eyes like midnight holding a child as she disappeared into the dark. He had tried to lock it away years ago, but the echoes returned with brutal clarity now. Anna coughed violently, and her mother quickly leaned forward, adjusting the mask, murmuring, "Don't force yourself, baby. Don't think of the past." Richard's gaze lingered on the girl, but his thoughts were already spiraling. Could it be? Could the woman Anna spoke of, the one who had died in that earlier fire, be connected to the part of his past he never spoke of? Anna's eyes, glassy but unyielding, found his. "I don't like fire," she whispered. "It takes everything." "But Sophie," she was crying. "I couldn't let it take her too." Her words pierced him. This child, who had already lost so much to fire, had thrown herself into the flames for his daughter. The weight of it pressed heavy against his chest. Her mother reached out, motioning him toward the door. "She needs rest. Please, Mr. Coleman, enough questions." Reluctantly, Richard stood. He glanced once more at Anna, then nodded. "Rest, brave girl," he murmured, his voice softer than he intended. In the hall, Clara was waiting. Her arms were folded, her eyes cold as ice. "You spend a lot of time with that child," she said flatly. "Don't forget where your duty lies, Richard. Sophie is the one who matters, not her." Richard's jaw tightened. "Anna matters," he said firmly. "She saved Sophie. And she's carrying scars no child should. You'll show her respect." Clara's eyes narrowed, but she forced a smile. "Of course," she said sweetly. But her gaze followed him down the corridor, sharp and calculating, as though Anna's survival was a problem yet to be solved. Richard walked on, his mind a storm. The fire hadn't just threatened Sophie, it had unearthed a past he thought was buried, and the key to that past might lie in the eyes of the child who had just saved his daughter's life. The hospital cafeteria was nearly empty when Richard sat across from Clara the next morning. A styrofoam cup of black coffee steamed in his hand, untouched. Clara sat perfectly composed, her silk blouse flawless, her makeup carefully reapplied as if the fire hadn't stolen their home only hours ago. Her calmness unsettled him. "You need to come home with me," she said smoothly, her manicured fingers resting lightly on his wrist. "What's left of the estate requires attention. The staff, the press, The insurance agents, they're all waiting for you." Richard pulled his hand away, his jaw tightening. "My daughter is in the ICU. Anna is barely clinging to strength. I'm not leaving this hospital." Clara's smile faltered. "Richard, be reasonable. Sophie is stable. And that girl—" She leaned forward, her voice lowering. "She is not your responsibility." Richard's eyes snapped up, cold steel in them. "She saved Sophie's life. Without her, we'd be planning a funeral right now." Clara's tone sharpened. "And what if she hadn't? What if she had stumbled, dropped her? Children don't think, they act. You're romanticizing recklessness." Richard's hand slammed the table, startling the few people in the cafeteria. "Don't you dare diminish what she did. She had more courage than anyone in that ballroom, including me." The words hung heavy between them. Clara's eyes narrowed, her mask cracking for the briefest moment, revealing the fire of anger beneath. Then she exhaled slowly, recovering her poise. "I'm only trying to keep you focused, Richard. We've built something together. Don't let a servant's child derail your priorities." But Richard barely heard her. His mind kept circling back to the investigator's words, to the unnatural spread of the fire, and to Clara's grip on his arm the night before, holding him back, keeping him from reaching Sophie. Later, when Richard walked the sterile halls back toward Sophie's room, he noticed Clara lingering in a corner, phone pressed to her ear. Her voice was hushed, sharp, almost venomous. "I don't care what it costs," she whispered fiercely. "It wasn't enough. Do you understand? This can't happen again. There must be no mistakes next time." Richard froze, his blood running cold. He stayed in the shadows, straining to catch every word. Clara's back was to him, her hand clutching her purse tightly. "Yes, I'll handle him. Just make sure it's clean." She hung up quickly, smoothing her hair before turning to join him in the hallway, her smile once again flawless. But Richard saw it now, the crack in her mask, the shadow beneath her beauty. "Is Sophie awake?" she asked, her voice light as if nothing had passed. Richard forced a nod, his face unreadable. "Yes, she's awake." But inside, suspicion was gnawing at him, louder and hotter than the flames that had gutted his mansion. Clara's words, her cold eyes, the unnatural fire, it was beginning to fit together into a picture he did not want to believe. As he stepped back into Sophie's room, he glanced across the hall where Anna lay. Her mother sat vigil, whispering softly in Spanish, rocking gently as though to keep her daughter tethered to this world. Anna stirred faintly, her lips moving behind the oxygen mask. And Richard felt that strange pull again. Two daughters, one by blood, one by fire, and standing between them, a wife whose secrets were becoming impossible to ignore. The hospital hallways had quieted after dusk, but the silence was not peace. It was the kind of silence that weighed heavy, broken only by the hum of machines and the occasional squeak of a nurse's shoes against the polished floor. Richard sat slumped in a chair outside Sophie's room, his head leaning against the wall, exhaustion tugging at him. Yet his mind refused to rest. Clara's phone call earlier replayed in his head like a poisoned echo. It wasn't enough. There must be no mistakes next time. He straightened suddenly, a surge of unease coursing through him. Clara had gone missing for nearly an hour. When he asked a nurse, she mentioned casually, "Your wife was seen near the east wing, down by the maintenance rooms." Richard's stomach tightened. What business did Clara have wandering those darkened halls? At that same moment, across the corridor, Anna stirred. Her small hand twitched against the sheets, and her eyes cracked open beneath heavy lids. The oxygen mask fogged with her shallow breaths. Her mother was asleep in the chair beside her, her body slumped forward in exhaustion. Anna turned her head weakly, ears pricking at the faint sound of voices drifting through the open window vent. A woman's voice, sharp, controlled. Clara's voice. "You don't understand," Clara hissed. "That house was supposed to burn with the child in it, both of them. Do you hear me?" Now Richard's distracted, torn between that brat and his daughter. "I need this finished before he starts asking too many questions." Anna's breath caught. Her chest heaved, the monitor beside her beeping faster. She wanted to cry out, but fear pressed her voice down. She gripped the sheet with tiny fists, her mind flashing back to the fire, to the way Clara had clung to Richard in the ballroom, not letting him move. The man Clara spoke to answered in a low murmur, too faint for Anna to make out. Clara cut him off, her voice venomous. No excuses. If Richard learns the truth, everything is over. Do you understand? Everything. Anna's small body shook. She tried to sit up, but her lungs rebelled, sending her into a violent coughing fit. Her mother jolted awake, rushing to steady her. "Shh, baby, don't push yourself," she whispered, stroking her braids. Anna pointed weakly toward the vent, her eyes wide with terror. "Mama, she wants Sophie." Her mother frowned, glancing toward the ceiling. "Who, baby? Who are you talking about?" But Anna's strength gave out. Her arm dropped limply back to the bed, and she slipped again into half-consciousness, her small body trembling beneath the sheets. At that same moment, Richard turned the corner, his shoes striking the tile softly. He paused near the maintenance wing, just in time to hear Clara's voice fade away. "Tomorrow? It has to be tomorrow." She hung up. He stepped back quickly, pressing himself against the wall before she emerged. Clara's heels clicked against the floor as she walked past. Her expression smooth, her coat draped elegantly around her shoulders. She did not see him standing in the shadows. Richard's heart pounded. He wanted to confront her right then, to demand answers, but something inside warned him Clara was dangerous. And if she was willing to orchestrate fire, she was capable of much more. He turned instead back toward Sophie's room, but his gaze fell on Anna's door, for a reason he could not explain. His feet carried him there. He peered in. The little girl lay weak, her mother rocking beside her, whispering soothing words. The monitor beeped steadily now, but Richard saw the fear still lingering in Anna's eyes even in sleep. He stepped inside quietly, his voice barely above a whisper. "You're safe now, Anna. No one will hurt you. Not while I'm here." The girl stirred, her lashes fluttering. For a fleeting moment, she seemed to hear him, her small lips forming a single word through the fog of half-dream. "Promise." Richard froze. Something in his chest broke at that word. He placed a hand gently on the bed rail, bowing his head. "I promise," he whispered, but even as the vow left his lips, he knew the storm was far from over. Clara's secrets were unraveling, and the cost of uncovering them could be higher than he dared imagine. Morning light seeped into the hospital, pale and gray, chasing away the long shadows of the night. Richard had not closed his eyes once. He sat in Sophie's room, his hand wrapped around his daughter's tiny fingers. Her breathing had steadied, soft and rhythmic beneath the oxygen mask. Relief washed through him with every rise and fall of her chest, but peace did not come, not with Clara's words echoing in his mind. It wasn't enough. Tomorrow, the door creaked open. A nurse entered quietly, carrying a clipboard. "She's improving," she whispered. "Her lungs are responding well. With a few more days, she should recover fully." Richard exhaled, nodding, though the weight pressing on his chest did not lift. When the nurse left, he kissed Sophie's forehead gently and rose. His gaze drifted across the hall to Anna's room. The little girl lay still, her braids splayed against the pillow, her mother holding her hand with fierce devotion. Anna's face was pale, but her lips moved faintly, whispering something in her sleep. Richard stepped closer to the door and heard it. "Promise." His throat tightened. He remembered the way she had looked at him last night, her wide eyes pleading. That single word had pierced deeper than any oath he'd ever made. He straightened, his jaw firm. "I keep my promises," he murmured. As he turned to leave, a figure appeared, Clara, in a tailored navy dress, her face flawless but her eyes sharp. "There you are," she said, her voice soft but edged with urgency. "The press is waiting. They want a statement from you about the fire." Richard studied her, searching her expression. "Do you want me to stand in front of cameras while my daughter lies in a hospital bed?" His tone was colder than ice. Clara's smile flickered, but she quickly recovered. "The world wants to know. The Coleman family is strong, unshaken. If you don't speak, people will start to whisper. About you, about us. Ugh. Let them whisper, Richard snapped. I'm not leaving Sophie. And I'm not abandoning Anna either. Her eyes narrowed. That girl again? Richard. She's not your child. She saved mine, he said, his voice rising. That makes her my responsibility too. For the first time, Clara's mask cracked, and a flash of anger flared in her eyes. She opened her mouth to speak, but Richard cut her off. Don't push me, Clara. Last night I heard things that make me wonder if the fire wasn't just fate, if someone wanted Sophie gone. Clara froze, her breath hitching almost imperceptibly. Then she forced a laugh, brittle and thin. Richard, you've been awake too long. You're imagining things. But he saw at the flicker of fear beneath her polished exterior. He stepped closer, his voice low and dangerous. If I find out you had anything to do with that fire, anything at all, there will be no place on this earth you can hide. For a moment, Clara's facade slipped entirely. Her jaw tightened, her eyes hardening with something sharp and venomous. Then, just as quickly, she smoothed her features into calm serenity. Of course, Richard, she said softly. I only want what's best for us. She turned and walked away, her heels clicking down the hall, leaving Richard alone in the silence. He exhaled, his hands trembling, rage and fear warring inside him. He looked once more toward Anna's room. The monitor beeped steadily. Her mother still holding her hand, whispering prayers. Richard pressed a hand to the glass window, his reflection superimposed over the small girl inside. I don't know why fate put you in my path, he whispered. But I won't let them take you or Sophie from me. Not again. In that moment, Richard felt his resolve harden like steel. He had built empires, fought battles in boardrooms, faced betrayal in business. But this was war of another kind, and this time, the stakes were blood. The day passed in a blur of reporters buzzing outside the hospital and murmurs in the hallways. Richard ignored it all. He spent the morning by Sophie's side, the afternoon checking on Anna. The little girl still slept most of the time, her chest rising in shallow breaths. But whenever her eyes fluttered open, they found Sophie's room across the hall, as if she was still guarding her. That evening, Richard stepped outside for the first time in days. The air was heavy with the scent of rain, though the sky was only overcast. He leaned against the cold stone wall, exhaustion pulling at him, when a man's voice came low and urgent from the shadows. Mr. Coleman. Richard straightened, his guard immediately rising. A man in a worn brown jacket stepped forward, his cap pulled low. He wasn't hospital staff, nor press. Richard could tell instantly. His eyes darted toward the entrance, then back to Richard. I don't have time, Richard said sharply. If you're looking for money, you'll have to wait. The man shook his head. This isn't about money. It's about the fire. Richard froze. Go on. The stranger glanced around again, his voice dropping. I worked some of the crews near your estate. I saw her. That woman, your wife. She was there before the fire. She went in through the back with a man carrying canisters. I thought it was odd, but I kept my head down. Then, an hour later, the blaze started. Richard's pulse thundered in his ears. You're certain it was her? The man nodded quickly. I'd swear it before God. But listen, be careful. Whoever she's working with, they're dangerous. You think the fire was the end? It wasn't. It was only the start. Richard's fists clenched at his sides. A part of him had known, but hearing it confirmed struck like a knife to the gut. Clara hadn't just been suspicious, she had orchestrated it. She had tried to kill Sophie. Why are you telling me this? Richard asked, his voice rough. The man's eyes flicked with fear. Because I have a daughter too. I couldn't sleep knowing I stayed quiet. He pressed a slip of paper into Richard's hand. This is the address where I saw her meet that man before the fire. A warehouse near the river. Be careful. They won't hesitate to finish the job. Before Richard could speak again, the man melted back into the shadows, leaving only the sound of the city around them. Richard looked down at the paper, the ink smudged but legible. A warehouse. Proof. His hand trembled as he folded it into his pocket. When he returned inside, Clara was waiting in the hallway, her arms folded, her expression carefully calm. "There you are," she said smoothly. "I was beginning to worry." Richard studied her face, his fury carefully hidden behind an unreadable mask. For Sophie, for Anna, he could not let her see what he knew, not yet. "Just needed air," he said flatly, brushing past her toward Sophie's room. But as he walked away, his mind burned with a single thought. He had played blind for too long. Now he had a target, and he would uncover the truth, no matter the cost. Across the hall, Anna stirred again, her small hand twitching in her mother's grasp. She whispered something faint, her lips barely moving. Richard stepped closer, leaning down. "What is it, Anna?" Her eyes cracked open, glassy with fever and fatigue. "Don't let the fire take her," she whispered. Richard's throat tightened. He brushed a hand gently over her hair. "I won't. Not Sophie. Not you. I promise." The rain had begun to fall by the time Richard reached the far side of Houston. It slicked the streets, turning the glow of the street lamps into smudged halos of light. He parked his car a block away from the warehouse, his jaw set, his fists tight on the steering wheel. The slip of paper from the stranger was still in his pocket, damp from the sweat of his hand. The warehouse loomed dark against the river, its corrugated metal walls streaked with rust, its windows blacked out. A single light glowed near a side entrance. Richard's chest tightened. He wasn't a man who normally crept into shadows. He commanded boardrooms, not back alleys. But tonight was different. Tonight was war. He stepped into the rain, his shoes crunching against gravel. He moved slowly, keeping to the shadows. Through a cracked window, he saw figures inside, two men in work boots and stained jackets. One leaned over a table covered in canisters, maps, and wires. The other lit a cigarette, his smoke curling up into the rafters. And then he saw her. Clara. She entered through a back door, her trench coat pulled tight against the rain, her hair hidden beneath a scarf. Even in this dim place, she carried herself with the same practiced elegance she showed at galas. But her voice was sharp, stripped of its mask. "You were careless," she snapped at the men. The girl survived, and now Richard is suspicious. If he uncovers what happened, everything we've built collapses. One of the men shrugged. "Fires don't always go the way you plan. Houses have a way of fighting back." Clara's hand slammed against the table. "I don't pay you for excuses. I pay you for results. Next time, no mistakes." Richard's blood ran cold, every word slicing deeper. She had paid them. She had plotted the fire. He clenched his fists, fury boiling inside him, but forced himself to stay silent. Bursting in now would solve nothing. The man with the cigarette leaned back. "And what about the kid, the one who dragged the baby out?" Clara's face hardened, her voice icy. "She's a problem. Problems are eliminated." Richard's vision tunneled, rage choking him. Anna. A 7-year-old girl, scarred already by flames, now marked for death by the woman who claimed to be Sophie's mother. His knuckles whitened against the wet metal of the window frame. The men nodded, one scribbling something onto the map. Clara leaned closer, lowering her voice. "The hospital. She's weak. It won't take much. And Richard must never know." That was enough. Richard pulled back, his breath sharp in the cold night air. His hands trembled, not with fear but with rage. He stumbled into the shadows, rain pelting his face, the truth burning in his chest. Clara wasn't just cold or selfish, she was lethal. She had tried to burn Sophie alive, and now she meant to silence Anna. When he finally reached his car, his reflection in the rain-streaked window startled him. His eyes were dark, hard, unrecognizable even to himself. He sank into the driver's seat, his pulse still thundering. His mind raced, weighing his next move. Go to the police? Confront Clara directly? Both options meant risk and time was running short. Then he remembered Anna's small voice from earlier. Weak but clear. Don't let the fire take her. He gripped the wheel until his knuckles ached. I won't, he whispered into the storm. Not Sophie, not Anna. I'll burn my world down first. The engine roared to life, and Richard turned the car back toward the hospital. Clara might still think she controlled the game, but she had underestimated him. For the first time since the fire, Richard Coleman was no longer afraid. He was angry, and anger, he knew, was far more dangerous than fear. The hospital was dim in the late hours, its long corridors lined with muted lights and the faint hum of machines. Richard walked quickly, his coat still damp from the rain. His mind replayed Clara's words at the warehouse, every syllable cutting deeper. The hospital. She's weak. Problems are eliminated. When he reached Anna's room, he stopped short. The door was ajar. A shadow moved inside. Richard pushed the door open silently, his heart pounding. Anna's mother was asleep in the chair, her head resting against the bed rail, exhaustion pulling her down. Anna herself lay small and fragile under the sheets, her oxygen mask fogging faintly with each breath. But someone else was in the room, a man, his jacket hood pulled up, his hand sliding slowly toward the machine by Anna's bedside. Richard's fury surged. Step away from her, he growled. The intruder spun, startled, his eyes narrowing. For a moment the room seemed to shrink. The only sound, the steady beep of Anna's heart monitor. Who the hell are you? The man spat. Richard stepped forward, his broad frame filling the doorway. I'm the man whose daughter she saved, and the man who will break you in half if you touch her. The man hesitated, then lunged toward the door. Richard moved faster, slamming him against the wall with a force that rattled the bed. Anna stirred, coughing weakly, her mother waking with a start. Mr. Coleman? Her mother gasped, eyes wide with fear. Richard didn't look away from the intruder. His forearm pressed hard against the man's chest, pinning him. Who sent you? He demanded. The man sneered, struggling. You don't want to know. Richard's grip tightened. Clara sent you, didn't she? The man's silence was answer enough. Richard shoved him harder, his voice a low snarl. If you ever come near her again, if you so much as breathe her name, I'll make sure you disappear long before the police ever get their hands on you. The man's eyes flicked with fear. He shoved Richard's shoulder and bolted past him, vanishing down the hall before security could arrive. Anna's mother rushed to her daughter's side, trembling as she adjusted the oxygen mask. My baby, she whispered. God, I almost lost you again. Richard stood frozen for a moment, his chest heaving. He turned slowly, his eyes falling on Anna. She was awake now, her wide dark eyes staring up at him. She reached out a weak hand, and Richard took it gently in his. You're safe now, he said, his voice softer than he expected. I promise you, no one will ever touch you again. Not while I'm here. Tears slipped down Anna's mother's cheeks. Why are you doing this for her, Mr. Coleman? You've already thanked her 100 times. You don't owe us anything. Richard shook his head, his eyes never leaving Anna. You're wrong. I owe her everything. And I don't abandon the ones who save my family. Anna's lips curved faintly beneath the mask, the ghost of a smile breaking through her exhaustion. For the first time since the fire, she seemed at peace, but Richard knew peace was fragile. Clara wouldn't stop. If she had sent one man tonight, there would be another tomorrow. He looked at Anna's mother, his voice steady. I need you to trust me. Keep her close. Don't let her out of your sight. And no matter what happens, don't trust Clara. The woman's eyes widened, confusion and fear battling within them, but she nodded slowly. I trust you, Mr. Coleman. I trust you. Richard squeezed Anna's small hand once more before releasing it. As he stepped back into the hallway, he felt the weight of a new truth settle on him. He wasn't just protecting Sophie anymore, he was protecting Anna too. And that meant he was protecting the future. The following morning broke gray and heavy, with rain streaking the hospital windows like tears. Richard hadn't slept. not even in the stiff chair by Sophie's bed. He had spent the long hours replaying the confrontation from the night before the intruder in Anna's room. The terror on her mother's face. The promise he had made. He could still feel the man's weight against the wall, still hear his mocking silence when he demanded the name of who had sent him. He didn't need the answer. He already knew. Clara. When a nurse came in to check Sophie's vitals, Richard stepped out into the hall. Across the corridor, Anna lay resting quietly, her mother awake now, clutching her daughter's hand with a vigilance that spoke of fear that never slept. Richard approached the door softly. Anna's mother looked up at him, her eyes rimmed with exhaustion but sharp with worry. "Is it true?" she whispered. "Was someone trying to hurt her last night?" Richard hesitated, then nodded. "Yes. But I stopped him. He won't come back. I'll make sure of it." The woman's hand tightened around Anna's. Why? Why would anyone want to hurt a child? She's already suffered enough. Richard's gaze darkened. Because she stood in the way. She saved Sophie when someone wanted her gone. He leaned closer, lowering his voice. "I think Clara is behind it. And if I'm right, then Anna and Sophie are both in danger." Her mother's lips parted in shock, then pressed together in fear. "Your wife?" Richard's jaw tightened. "I don't want to believe it either. But the signs are there. The fire wasn't an accident, and last night proved she hasn't stopped." Anna stirred faintly, her dark eyes opening just enough to catch their voices. "Promise?" she whispered again, her voice hoarse but steady. Richard knelt beside her bed, his large hand enveloping her tiny one. "Yes, Anna, I promise. No one will take you from me. No one will hurt you again." Her fingers curled weakly around his, and a flicker of relief passed over her soot-marked face before she drifted back to sleep. Moments later, Richard's phone buzzed. A text from Clara. "Meet me in the lobby, now." He exhaled slowly, tucking the phone into his pocket. When he reached the lobby, Clara was waiting, dressed immaculately in cream, as if the last 2 nights had never happened. Her smile was brittle, her voice smooth. "Richard, you've been avoiding me. People are asking questions. Why did you stay here all night again? What's so special about that girl?" His voice was cold. "She saved Sophie's life." Clara's smile faltered. "And now you think she's yours to protect?" "Richard, you're being irrational. She's a servant's child, nothing more." Something snapped inside him. He stepped closer, his voice low and fierce. "Don't you ever call her that again. She is braver than anyone I've ever known. And she matters." For the first time, Clara's mask slipped, revealing a flash of venom. But she quickly recovered, her voice dropping to a purr. "Be careful, Richard. People might think you're forgetting where your loyalties lie." His eyes burned into hers. "My loyalties lie with my children. Both of them." Clara blinked, startled. "Both?" Richard didn't flinch. "Yes, Sophie and Anna. I'll protect them both, with or without you." Clara's eyes hardened, her voice dripping with contempt. "Then you've already made your choice." She turned sharply, her heels striking the polished floor as she stormed out of the lobby. Richard stood alone, the rain tapping softly against the glass doors, his chest heavy but resolute. For years, he had built empires, trusting strategy and calculation. But this was no boardroom battle. This was blood, fire, and betrayal. And for the first time in his life, Richard knew exactly where his heart stood. His choice was made. He would be a father not only to Sophie, but to Anna, the child who had risked everything for his family. And if Clara wanted war, then war she would have. The storm had lifted by evening, leaving the city washed clean beneath a pale silver sky. From the hospital window, Richard could see the wet streets glistening, the traffic lights reflected in shallow puddles. But inside him, no calm had come. The choice he had made burned steady in his chest. He would protect Sophie and Anna at all costs, even if it meant tearing his world apart. He found Clara waiting for him in the visitor's lounge, her posture perfect, her expression cool. She had changed again this time into a dark suit, sharp and severe, as though dressing for battle. Her eyes followed him as he entered, her smile faint but brittle. "You've been busy," she said softly, "spending hours with that girl, whispering with her mother. People are beginning to notice. What will they think of you, Richard? A billionaire, clinging to a child that isn't even his?" Richard stood tall, his shadow stretching across the sterile tile floor. "They'll think I'm a father who remembers who saved his baby's life. They'll think I'm a man who honors courage." His voice deepened. Anger threaded through it. "What they won't think, what they will never think, is that I could let my wife burn my daughter alive." Clara's mask slipped, her smile vanishing. For a heartbeat, her face was naked with fury. Then she laughed, a sharp, humorless sound. "So you know." "I know enough," Richard snapped. "I know about the warehouse. I know about the men you hired. And I know you tried to silence Anna. Tell me why, Clara. Why Sophie? Why me?" Clara rose, her heels striking the floor with precision. She circled him slowly, her eyes gleaming like a predator's. "Because, Richard, everything you own should have been mine. Do you know what it's like to stand in your shadow? To smile while everyone whispers that you'll never be more than a second wife? A decoration? I was never going to be a decoration. I was going to own it all. And your daughter, your precious Sophie, was in the way." Richard's fists clenched, his knuckles white. "She's a baby." "All the better," Clara hissed. "No heirs, no legacy to bind you. You would have had only me." The words hit Richard like a physical blow. He stepped closer, his voice low, trembling with rage. "You tried to kill my child. You nearly killed Anna, and you dared to call it love?" Clara's smile curved again, dark and mocking. "Love? No, Richard. Power. Something you, of all people, should understand." For a moment, the silence between them was heavy, electric, dangerous. Richard stared at the woman he had once believed would be his partner, his comfort, and saw only a mask of beauty over a soul of ice. At last, his voice cut through the stillness. "It ends tonight. You won't come near Sophie again. You won't come near Anna. I will see to it personally." Clara's eyes narrowed, but she didn't flinch. "You think you can cut me out, Richard? You think the police will believe you over me? I'm your wife. I'll walk out of here with half of everything you own, and you'll be left with nothing but your guilt." Richard shook his head slowly, his expression cold, unyielding. "No, you've already lost. You just don't know it yet." Clara stepped back, her lips tightening. For the first time, Richard saw a flicker of doubt behind her anger. He turned, leaving her standing in the sterile lounge, her reflection caught in the darkened window like a ghost. His footsteps echoed down the corridor, each one steady, certain. The fight was no longer in the shadows. It was out in the open now. And Richard was ready. The hospital smelled of antiseptic and rain-soaked air as Richard walked the long corridor toward Sophie's room. Every step was heavy, yet steady. His heart pounded with the weight of all he had uncovered: the fire, the betrayal, the wife he had once trusted now revealed as the architect of his family's near destruction. He opened Sophie's door gently. The baby stirred at the sound, her tiny hand twitching beneath the blanket. Richard knelt, brushing her damp curls back, whispering, "You're safe now, my little one. No one will ever harm you again." Across the hall, Anna was awake. Her mother sat close, holding her hand. But when she saw Richard, she beckoned him inside. Anna's eyes were clearer now, though still rimmed with exhaustion. "You kept your promise," she whispered, her voice raspy. Richard's throat tightened. "I told you I would." He sat at her bedside, his large hand enveloping her smaller one. "You saved Sophie. Now it's my turn to save you." Anna's mother leaned forward, her voice trembling. "Mr. Coleman, is it true? Was your wife behind all this?" Richard nodded slowly, the truth bitter on his tongue. "Yes. She tried to take everything from me, Sophie, my future, my peace. And she nearly succeeded. But not anymore. I'll see her held accountable." The woman's eyes welled with tears, but she gave a firm nod. Then may God be with you. Because she will not go quietly. Moments later, detectives arrived. Richard had called them after his confrontation with Clara, and now he handed them the slip of paper from the stranger. Told them of the warehouse, the men, and Clara's role. His voice was steady, but his fury simmered beneath every word. Clara was brought in shortly after, her composure still intact, her crimson lips curved in a thin smile. "Really, Richard?" she purred as the detectives read her rights. "Dragging our private matters into the open like this? This isn't private," Richard said coldly. "You tried to murder my child. You tried to silence a brave little girl. There's nothing private about that." For the first time, Clara's mask cracked. Her eyes flashed with fury as the detectives led her away, her heels clacking against the tile. "You'll regret this, Richard," she spat. "You'll regret crossing me." But Richard didn't flinch. He watched her disappear down the corridor, her voice echoing like a ghost behind her, and felt a strange calm settle over him. Later, he returned to Sophie's room, holding her gently in his arms. Then he crossed the hall to Anna, who looked up at him with wide, steady eyes. "Why did you do it?" he asked softly. "Why run into fire for someone you didn't have to?" Anna's voice was faint but sure. "Because no one should cry alone." And I heard her cry. Richard swallowed hard, the child's words cutting deeper than anything Clara had ever said. He leaned forward, pressing his lips to her forehead, his voice rough. "You'll never cry alone again, not while I live." The storm outside had passed, leaving the world washed clean. The flames had destroyed his house, his illusions, and his marriage. But from the ashes, something stronger had risen: truth, loyalty, and the bond between a man and two children who now carried his heart. Richard stood between their rooms that night, his back straight, his eyes steady. Clara's fire had failed, the truth had burned brighter, and for the first time in years, Richard Coleman felt like a father not just to the child of his blood, but to the one who had stepped from the fire with courage beyond her years. In the end, the fire was more than an act of destruction, it was a revelation. It stripped away the illusions of wealth, beauty, and power, exposing the truth of loyalty, sacrifice, and courage. From Anna, a child with nothing to give but her own small life, came the greatest lesson: that love and bravery are not bound by blood or status. And from Richard, a man who nearly lost everything, came the reminder that being a father is not about what you own, but about whom you choose to protect. The lesson is simple, yet eternal. True family is forged not in comfort, but in fire, and justice must always stand against betrayal, no matter how close to home it hides.